The cops are at your door. They're knocking or they're calling you on your cell phone, and because you are a subject of their investigation. Not a good spot to be in, but we're going to walk you through it all here. Kelly and I are going to talk about exactly what you should do if you find yourself on the receiving end of a police investigation. So, Kelly, just kind of talk through what an investigation even is, because some people don't even realize that they are the subject of investigation.
Yeah, that was the first thing I was going to say we should talk about is many times people might think, oh, the police are trying to get in contact with me. I'm just going to call them and figure out what they want, right? But I mean, if you were like the victim of a crime or something, you're going to be contacting the police, not the other way around, right? So if they're trying to get in contact with you, they're knocking at your door saying they want to talk about, an incident occurred, say you're not home, they're calling you, they're leaving their business card with your spouse or whatever, that should be a red flag to you that they want to get in contact with you and that you are probably the subject of an investigation, or you might be a witness. And even in that situation, you may want to speak to an attorney.
I mean, there's a million different reasons why the police could be wanting to get in touch with you. Like, they found your dog, down a couple blocks over, right? It could be something very innocuous. Again, you could be the victim, obviously. And but here, let's use your best judgment, guys. If you're like, oh shit, I know what that's about, right? Or I think I know what that's about. Go with that and assume that that's what that's about, right? And so now we're going to talk to you about sort of how do you handle that?
Yeah. I think that a lot of times, right, we get a lot of calls for leaving the scene of an accident or fleeing and eluding, right? So you obviously know why they're calling you in that situation. If you legitimately have zero idea why they're calling you, I guess it would be okay to call the police and just figure out what it is and don't make any statements. Don't try and explain your side of the story. Just get their contact information, figure out what they're calling about, and hang up and, make a better decision once you kind of have all the information. But if the police are trying to get in contact with you, the number one best thing you can do is contact a trusted criminal defense attorney or traffic attorney and hire them to represent you during the investigation.
Yep, exactly right. And I'm not trying to oversell this. If you don't need it, you don't get a lawyer. But if you're the subject, you want a lawyer. The wall that a lawyer can put up between you and the police is significant if you're the subject of their investigation.
Sometimes, too, you may not realize that you're going to make a statement that's against your interest that's going to hurt you. We had this incident the other day where there was our client and he was driving a vehicle and somebody else hit him and he, was afraid and he left. So he was actually the victim of the accident because he left the scene. Now he's being, investigated for that and potentially charged with crimes. And he called the officer back and was like, yeah, I was driving, but she hit me. And he didn't realize that he had made a statement directly against his interest saying, I was driving, I was involved in the accident, and I left. And he's like, but it wasn't my fault. The accident wasn't my fault.
Right. He just admitted to committing a crime. It is a crime here in Illinois to leave the scene of an accident. And if that other person, even if that other person who hit him, it was their fault, right? But if that person was seriously injured or, God forbid, killed, him leaving is now a felony, a very serious felony.
Right. And he just admitted to committing a crime, and he didn't know that he had even admitted that, and he had done that before he even hired us. So then he hires us for the investigation. Like, you've already made a bunch of statements against your interests,
Yes.
So super important to hire an attorney, in my opinion. A lot of attorneys do charge a reasonable price for representing you during the investigation. And what that basically means is that we're going to talk to the police on your behalf. We're going to do all the talking. We're not going to make any statements that are against your interests. One great thing that sometimes happens is that the police are contacting you because they don't have enough evidence to charge you. So they want you to give them a call back, to go down to the station and make statements against your interests to give them evidence to have enough to charge you. So I think one of the best parts of our job when we represent somebody on an investigation is we call the police and we're like, hey, officer, John Doe's not going to be coming down and making any statements. And they're like, all right.
But wait, Kelly, doesn't that make me look guilty to the police officer?
No. I mean, it doesn't matter what it makes you look like to the
Right.
police officer, right? You have the right to remain silent and you should exercise that right. And that cannot be held against you in court, which is the most important thing.
Exactly right. I hear that way too often. You're like, what are you worried about that for? Like,
Yeah.
who cares what this officer thinks of you? He's literally trying to arrest you. Like, and you want to like not hurt his feelings?
Mhm.
How about you just protect yourself instead?
He already thinks you're like, a
Yep.
suspect. So he already thinks you're guilty of the crime. Why would you ever want to give the police evidence to use against you that's going to cost you money, your freedom, and a whole slew of other consequences?
Let's lay out a scenario here. So I am in the Walmart parking lot. I'm backing up. I hit this other car. Nothing crazy. Like our bumpers hit, and we're exchanging. This guy's kind of getting to be aggressive with me. So I hop in my car and take off. Like, I don't want to get in a fight with this guy. So I take off. Now, a couple hours later, the cops are calling me. I answered the phone and they're like, oh, yeah, come on in. You got to come talk to me. You got to come down to the police station. The cops are super aggressive with me. Take it from there. What happens now? I mean, that's a scenario that a lot of people could find themselves in. So tell me what happens next.
Definitely. You would give us a call. You'd hire us to represent you in the investigation. We would call the police and we would just say, hey, our client's not coming down to the station. He's not going to be making any statements about this at all. But if you want to charge him or you have enough evidence to charge him, then let me know and I'd be happy to pick a time with you to turn him in.
Yep.
So there's a couple of things there. One is once I hang up the phone with that police officer, I am going to send a written document called a notice of invocation of rights. And I'm going to save the proof that I sent that either to this trooper directly and or their admin or the chief of police that says, driver defense team is this person's attorney. Don't contact them without me. Don't try to question them without me. I am the attorney and you are put on notice. So that's a great thing because A, we have the proof in writing that we did it, A. B, then they shouldn't keep calling you and harassing you. I mean, sometimes they'll go to your work, they'll get a hold of your
Absolutely.
significant other, your mother, and try and figure out where you are. They'll go to all of your last known addresses and stuff. They'll keep calling. So it should take care of that, A. And then the other thing is if they do have enough to charge you without you making those statements, right? For example, Walmart surveillance video, the complaining witness is making a statement. The complaining witness is really wanting you to be charged. That's not going to change, right?
Right.
But we want to make it easier on you, the client, because if we don't pick a day and time to turn you in, then they're going to get a warrant for your arrest.
Yep.
And then that means that you could be picked up literally at any time on your way to work, on your way to pick up your kid. And then it's not a day and time that's convenient for you and your life. And also then we wouldn't be there with you.
Yep. I'd say there's three sort of different levels to this. Though the first is that the cops just want to talk to you, right? They want to question you and to see where it goes from there. The second one is that whether you they still want to talk to you, but whether you talk to them or not, they've got enough, they're arresting you. I actually dealt with this today. I called the detective and I said, I represent so-and-so. I said, where are we at with this? I know you want to come and talk, you want to talk to her, but obviously I'm not going to bring her in to make any statement. He is, I don't care if I talk to her or not. He goes, I've got her on video of this, and this. I've got all of this. She's ready to be charged. You just let me know if you're going to do this the simple way where they come in, and you can come in, Mr. Lawyer, too, right? And she doesn't have to make any statements, but she's going to come in and get processed, or I'm going to issue a warrant and we're going to go out and get her. Right? The police are now, there's an active warrant and the police are actively searching for you. So that was that scenario, right? But I've had other ones where you call and, I mean, I've had officers, I know you have too, detectives, officers admit like, we think they're a part of this. We don't have enough. If you're telling me that they're represented by you and you're not going to let them make any statements, I'm going to go ahead and close my investigation. And that's the end of this, right?
Yeah. Sometimes like cops are really cool too, and I think a lot of it might depend on the complaining witness, especially if it's leaving the scene of an accident. They're like, well, listen, this is a fender bender, nobody got hurt. The complaining witness just wants your client's insurance. Send that over to me and I will not be issuing any traffic citations. Like I've got bigger fish to fry too. So I mean, in those situations, right, that's like the best money you've ever spent hiring us to just send your insurance over, and then you don't get charged with, misdemeanor criminal offenses or something more serious.
Yes.
Um,
If you are the subject of the investigation, this is hiring a lawyer. It is the best money you ever spent on this, because think of through those different scenarios. It was either just they simply wanted to question you, that got shut down, and the investigation got shut down. Like you said, great money spent there. Number two is they are already going to arrest you, which we can't undo, but they're already going to arrest you. And by letting them know that you're not making any statements, you didn't make the case worse against you in court. You didn't make any admissions, right? Or number three is they've got a search warrant. They're going to come get you. At least now and we can facilitate turning you in if that's what you choose to do. About it, and we can facilitate turning you in, as opposed to them, knocking on your door, waking you up in the middle of the night.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, if they have enough to charge you, that's not something that we're going to change, right? We're not miracle workers. We can't go back and change the past. We can't erase those surveillance videos, but we can make it a way easier process for you, to ensure that you're not getting picked up off the street. A. B, we go with our clients to the police departments and turn them in. We ease a lot of their anxiety, because sometimes the officers will tell us very easily they'll be in and out in an hour as long as there's no warrants. They'll just be released with traffic citations. But other times, if they're being investigated for a felony, then the police have to call the felony review department. So from the time that you turn yourself in, they basically have 72 hours to get all that information together. Felony review can come down to the police department and interview witnesses. That all has to be video recorded, and that all has to be put together. So, we're going to counsel you on literally what you should wear to the police department, what the expectations are, how long you're going to be there. Most importantly, that you are not going to waive your Miranda rights. You're not going to make any statements. And if you are charged and brought in front of a judge for a detention hearing, we're going to be there with you too. So just having us there on all these different points of contact in this very initial phase that can be very anxiety ridden, I think is really worth the help too. And we're making sure that you're not going to back us, your defense attorney, into a corner, like in the case itself, right? You're not going to say something that we have to explain later or that we're stuck to.
Yep, exactly right. I mean, and what's the alternative? The alternative is you can go handle the police investigation yourself. Like, no one ever has been like, that's a great idea, go do that, right? Nobody watching this should be like, that's what everybody should do. Or you could just totally ignore the police, right? You could just ignore them knocking on your door. You could ignore them calling you, trying to get in touch with you. Yeah, they may work for a period of time, but obviously, depending on how serious it is, they're gonna catch up to you eventually. Like I said, they can issue a warrant for your arrest, and so, depending on how they issue the warrant, anywhere in the United States throughout time for forever, if you ever run into anyone in law enforcement, you're getting taken into custody. Like, that is a possibility. So going on the run is typically not advised either.
No, and they can tell that you have a warrant even just running your license plate. You don't have to be like committing a traffic violation and get pulled over to then determine you have a warrant. I think some people might ignore the letter being sent to your house more than like the knock at the door and the phone calls and coming to your work. Sometimes that happens, right? You're in an accident, you leave the scene for whatever reason, and it gets reported to the police, and the police literally snail mail you a letter. And they're like, hey, I know you were in an accident on January 1st on I-294 at 3:05 p.m. Give me a call. Well, if you don't give them a call, they can suspend your driving privileges.
Yep.
And they, in that situation where you're getting that letter, they're not going to keep reaching out.
No, they'll just suspend you.
They'll just suspend you. I mean, these type of officers, this is like what they do pretty much all the time. So ignoring it and doing it yourself are definitely not the right answers.
Exactly. And yeah, this is such it's a lot of, you'd hear us going down all these different possibilities and avenues, but this is one where like every single time it just makes sense to hire a lawyer. We talked about, whether it's questioning or they're going to arrest you or there's already a warrant for your arrest. Either way, inserting the attorney is going to make life easier. Another one, though, is the vehicle. A lot of these, the cops will tow your vehicle, right? They see this happens. They can locate the vehicle. They take it. and now you want your car back, right? Like literally this morning we had one, that same one where the person does need to turn themselves in, but the cop agreed to release the vehicle back in exchange for them turning themselves in. Otherwise, the cops could have seized that vehicle. Now they got to jump through some hoops, and you can always fight a seizure. But like that's a $40,000 vehicle, right? So like it's a $40,000 value that we were able to negotiate for that client. They're getting arrested either way, but you might as well do it where you keep your $40,000 vehicle.
Yeah, that's not always, the case that they will return it. It is nice when they do, but sometimes your vehicle is the subject of an investigation. Like sometimes, they're literally going to hold that vehicle while the case is pending. They need to run forensics on it. It could literally be evidence. In that situation, no matter how good your lawyer is, you're not getting that car back while the case is pending.
Yep.
I've seen horrible situations in Chicago, for example, which obviously is a gigantic police department. There's a ton of tow lots and companies that they contract with, where it was, they thought it was leaving the scene of an accident. The officer stopped caring about it, was like, we're not going to charge your guy. But like the car was lost in like the tow hell, and we kept calling like all these places. Nobody wanted to help us, which is another thing. Nobody has to really talk to us or help us. There's no case pending. We don't have an appearance on file because there is no file, so if you're getting somebody on the phone who's nice and competent, that's great. And then we finally found out where the car was in that situation, and his registration was expired and he was out of state. It was a nightmare trying to get this guy's car back. And that's not really what you're hiring us for. You're hiring us to represent you while you're being investigated for a crime. It's something we try and help you with, but that's really not, our goal.
Right. We care about the criminal charges.
Yeah, exactly.
Mainly. So again, someone's a subject of investigation. They hire us. Best case scenario, we talk to the officer or the detective, and they decide not to charge you. That's amazing, right? But if they do decide to charge you, then where do we go from there? We can talk about turn-ins and sort of how we've helped that.
Yeah, I always try and work it out with the officer to pick a day and time that I'm going to turn my client in. I think the officers really appreciate that because then, they have it on the books. They can tell their superiors, okay, this guy's turning himself in on this day. They don't have to then go through the whole process of getting a warrant, an arrest warrant, which isn't the easiest thing to do. And I think it's really helpful to set up that rapport between us, your attorney, and you, right? And the officer in this like really pre-trial, pre-charge stage, because you never know, how the case is going to turn out. It could be a situation where you're negotiating with the state to get a reduced charge or the minimum sentence or something. And guess what? The state's going to reach out to that police officer and say, hey, do you care if this client gets a reducer? And they might say, no, you know what? Her attorney were super cool. They turned themselves in. They communicated with me. They were professional with me right from the get-go, and I'm fine with this person getting a break. So I think it's good to establish that right away.
Yep. Also, at least here in Illinois, if it's a felony, most felonies, you're going to go to a detention hearing, right? So the officer arrests you. We'll take you over to the county jail. You go in front of a judge, and the judge decides should you be released or not. In other states, it's, what amount of bail needs to be posted for you to be released. And which would you rather be saying to the judge? My client is not a flight risk. As soon as they learned about this, they turned themselves in. They have, the benefit of an attorney. They'll be here in every court date. They plan to fight this in court, Your Honor. Versus, oh yeah, they went on the run for the last year and a half.
Right.
You're not going to get released again. It's less likely that you would be released again because what's the assumption? That you're going to run again, right? So it can be a world of difference in terms of how these early stages are handled.
Yeah, I think even the experience for the client is way better, especially in a felony situation. As we were saying, they can hold you up to 72 hours. So for 3 days, you, your family, and us, right? If we didn't have this good rapport built with the police, don't know what's going on. We don't know if you're being charged, what you're being charged with, and when you're going to be transferred to the courthouse for us to represent you. So when we have a good rapport with the police officers, they'll call us and give us updates along the way, and then I can update the family, and then I can make sure that, you know, somebody from the firm is going to be there to represent you, because we know when the court date
Yep.
and time and location is, which is huge, especially where we practice here in Cook County. There's not just one courthouse. You know, there's multiple courthouses. You could be in one main courthouse for that jurisdiction, but then if you get transferred to court on a holiday, a court holiday, a Sunday, it's going to be somewhere different at a different time. So all that stuff honestly does make a big difference.
Yep. I mean, I've scheduled these around holidays before, you know, I'm like, hey, officer, can we do it after the holiday? It's in 3 days. And sometimes, depending on the seriousness of the offense, you know, the officer's like, yeah, sure. We'll put this on hold for 3 days and then we'll do it. I had one where a guy was definitely getting locked up for a little while. And so he's like, all I want to do is make it to my kid's birthday. I don't know, his 5th birthday or something like that. I'm like, man, I get it. And I told the officer that, and the officer's like, fine, you know what? I'll give you those 2 days or whatever, do the birthday party thing, and then I want you here at 9 a.m. on whatever day. And we held our word, the officer held his, and that made all the difference in the world to this client.
Mhm. I had a client that was addicted to opioids, and he was very afraid about like going through those withdrawal symptoms while he was sitting at the police department. And he asked if he could turn himself in and go through detox for 3 days before he turned himself in. And the officer said yes. We sent him the proof that he did that, and then, you know, he wasn't
Yeah.
sick, you know,
Yeah.
and potentially like life threatening while at the police department.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
you never know the little things that might come up that, like we said, make a big difference.
Yeah, we've talked about so many different things here and so many places where an attorney can be valuable when you're the subject of an investigation, and literally every path. No, I can't tell you what's going to happen on your case or ultimately, you know, where you're going to go. Are you going to be charged or are you not? But literally at the end of every path, it is easier and smoother with an attorney on your side. I mean, it's that simple.
I agree.